Yep, green. I think it's better now. Okay. Hey, hello everyone. Really glad to be here and to moderate this panel with some really good people from DeFi and also specifically from the Zurich kind of ecosystem actually, Michael and Florian here. I think just a sentence for everyone for your background so people know who you are. I'm going to start. I'm Nils. I'm a co-founder of DeFi Collective. We are a non-profit association in Switzerland, and our mission is to foster genuine DeFi, so really true DeFi projects. And we have created DeFiScan.info, which is, if you're familiar with L2Beat for L2s, which is kind of the same thing for DeFi projects.
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm CEO from Liquidity, and that has developed the Liquidity protocol, which I presented just before, so I keep it short.
Hey everyone, I'm Niha. I'm from SAFE. My role there is a technical product manager, and the vision at SAFE is to bring world's GDP on chain, and we believe that can be done through smart accounts. Based out of Zurich, super happy to be here and share my thoughts.
So Florian, Nils already introed. I'm an attorney. I work at Lexer, which is a tech law firm here in Zurich, but also in Berlin. We're in Berlin as well. So I work a lot with DeFi on kind of the legal setup and regulation and everything that's around there, and also work with Nils on the DeFi Collective here.
So I think what's obvious here, it's a really diverse group, right? So we have all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of perspectives on DeFi, DeFi builder, legal, and then smart account SAFE, which has been a pioneer in the space, as we all know, right? There is actually one person missing, unfortunately. I'm not sure if the side events this year are much more buzzing than last year, but he couldn't make it today. We're just gonna cover him too. So I want to start this conversation. The panel is about decentralization in DeFi, right? So DeFi, decentralized finance. So what is actually this decentralization in DeFi? What is the kind of current landscape? What is decentralization? How is DeFi decentralized or not? And we are going to touch on different questions surrounding that topic. And I want to start with you, Michael. For those of you who have been in here before, he just presented some aspects around Liquidity v2. Congrats on launching Liquidity v2. I think it's another testament to the mission that Liquidity has in building fully decentralized protocols, right? So yeah, the question is why this focus? Why do you build protocols that have no governance? As we know, Liquidity v1 is fully mutable. There's almost no governance in the v2. Why that focus?
Yeah, there is an obvious and a less obvious answer. And the obvious answer is, yes, we are decentralization maxis. We want to build protocols with that in mind. And why? I think it's about control. You don't want to give up the control. And I think because as you have seen, if you give your dollars to a bank or so, you have to trust somebody else, a person, a company, and so on. And I think for us here, crypto people, a lot of us trust more into code than what we have seen, what others do when they have the power over their money. So I think what decentralization allows you is to keep control. And I think that's a very cool thing from the technology perspective, that you have this credible neutrality. You don't need to trust somebody. And I think that's also what brings a lot of us to blockchain. But the less obvious answer, and when I thought about this question, is I also think it allows you to make new and innovative and better products. And why? So if you look at our V2, what we pioneered there, we are the first protocol where a user can set their own rate. You don't have that in TradFi. In other DeFi, there is a governance vote. Or sometimes it's algorithmically done by usage. But we are the first ones that allow the market to find an equilibrium rate in real time in the market, and by just using smart contracts. So I think that's really innovative and cool, and something maybe you can't do in TradFi. And the other thing which I mentioned before is that we pass 100% from the revenue through to the other users on chain. And I think that's also something that's really great with smart contracts, and we should use it for that. And it makes the product more predictable, and I think also better, because others funnel it to a DAO treasury and then it disappears. And it's the obvious and simple solution. And then I think by using decentralization and smart contracts in that way, we can also, if we are willing to explore, create better products. But it's really hard. Making decentralization really work isn't the easy choice.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, right? It's actually hard. It's probably harder than building non-decentralized protocols, and I think that's very obvious for stablecoins. You know the stablecoin trilemma. You always give up on another end when you build these products. Nihar, for Safe too, right? Building, let's say, decentralized kind of asset custody products. Do you also think and see that that this is harder?
Well, we don't build assets per se, but I think there's a shift in owning what you own yourself. Like in the past, there has been examples where you, or not you, but like users put their funds in an exchange and they believe it's safe. Just because they're holding crypto, they automatically assume that their assets are safe. And now there's probably more education in that area where people want to do self-custody. And yes, we want to do self-custody, but it's not so simple, I believe. Like, even though it's just 12 words on a piece of paper, it's not that simple. You hop on from one chain to another. Does that mean now those 12 become 24? And on different chains, maybe some are not EVM compatible. So they're like more words. And that's where I think smart accounts kick in. And smart accounts are more like end to a means. The means is still decentralization. And what we really want to achieve is openness, permissionlessness, censorship resistance, and available to all, per se. And I think the protocol level is one of the ways to go about it. On the blockchain level, it really matters how easy it is for like home validators to also set up their nodes, so that you really believe that the infrastructure on which your contracts are living are in fact decentralized. There are many chains that emerge which have like single points of failure, or like a very beefy sequencer, which are only proposing blocks like in a single entity, which may not be like the true essence of decentralization, but I think we kind of are getting there. And Safe truly believes that the way forward is through self-custody and truly owning what assets you have. So not your keys, not your coins.
I think that's very safe, and other wallets have done, an important job in actually making it possible for less technical people to hold assets in a decentralized way with self-custody wallets, right? But you mentioned centralized exchanges before, for instance, right? Something that people still use a lot, and there are good reasons. I just want to touch real quick on the fact that trust. You mentioned trust before. I have to trust a bank. Now I don't have to trust a bank anymore, but there is still trust involved, right? And so the trust now just shifts to technology. Do you think that's easier for people, or how can we make that easier for people to trust technology?
It's like, when we say technology, I believe like something like Bitcoin pops up in my mind. Mm-hmm. Like, even though the markets go haywire sometimes Bitcoin still holds its king position, which it always did. So that's one part of trust. The other part is like, what kind of ecosystem is emerging on these chains? Are people getting rugged a lot? Are people getting burnt a lot? That also fuels into trust. How people perceive the technology, whether it's only going to be about memes, or is it actually going to solve any real problems? And I think the industry, I personally believe that the industry is at an inflection point where our industry either makes it or it does not. If we cannot show real world use cases beyond entertainment with meme coins, I don't know, how easy would it be to survive?
Maybe just quickly on trust and technology, I completely agree. And sometimes I have really a problem with the word trustless. It's not a trustless technology, it's just not trust in something else, in technology. And how is it better having trust in technology? I think the nice thing, it's fairer, or it's more transparent, because I might not have the information from the bank what they do with my dollars. But with blockchain and technology, at least I can see the assets, I see the code, I see kind of the decisions that will be made. And if I myself are not a coder, maybe there is at least a community that can have some control. So I think the balance of power is more equal, and I think that's a nice thing.
Yeah, just very briefly, I think from what we are building with DeFi Scan, I think you're going to touch on that as well. I think we should also be aware, though, that yes, I think everything is on chain and it's transparent and we can view it, etc. And in theory, we can look at the protocols we're using and we can see whether they are safe or not. But I think for the average user, it's a lot to ask usually, right? So I think there will be, again, instances or layers of trust built upon that. For example, DeFi Scan or L2Beat or whatever, that kind of make it easier for the user to understand what they're interacting with, and then obviously there is a level of trust in these organizations again.
I think the power is that everyone can actually just come in and do the same work potentially and verify or invalidate some of those, let's say, data platforms that aim at establishing transparency, right?
And just quickly, what is the difference? I wouldn't understand a balance sheet either, from a bank. But at least here the information is out in the public, and which is not in TradFi where you need another trust.
Right. Speaking about decentralization, right, and DeFi, I just want to touch real quick on the terminology, or what does it actually mean, right? So oftentimes we speak about DeFi, and is it decentralized or it's not decentralized? We said liquidity is decentralized, right? And we may say USDC is not decentralized. So just qualify the term. I don't know if someone of you wants to jump in and just try to define what it means. What is decentralized in DeFi? What does it mean? And I'm happy to also, I'm curious to see whether someone of you has a very good definition.
Quick shot, it's really who has control over something. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. So control is one dimension there.
Control makes it less decentralized, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, that's the point from the regulator. They're calling it centralization vectors. So they're looking very closely where can few people influence what through the whole stack. And I think we'll touch on that. You have the blockchain, you have the app layer, you have front ends, you have different layers where it can apply.
Yes, 100% agreed. Like there's several layers which need to be decentralized, to be honest. It's not just the app or the protocol. Like it cannot be only a DEX that's decentralized. It must rest on an infrastructure that is by nature decentralized. And if it's just one node on a chain that's running somewhere like Hyperledger or something, it's very questionable whether or not it's decentralized, right? And also, like, as a technologist, if you go in layers beneath that, below the blockchain, really, is our IP or is our internet provider giving us that sense of decentralization? Or whether or not a government of a country can truly block the access of internet altogether, or whether or not the wires underneath the oceans, could they be cut off and the communication goes down? So I think like decentralization is used, as a term, it's used very loosely, we are decentralized, but we are very, very far from being decentralized. And I think the balance is like, how much trust can we ultimately put in the layers beneath, which are not decentralized, for them to remain censorship resistant? And ultimately, who has the control, who does not have the control, is also something, as you pointed out, is very fair. Like ultimately, if you do not own your assets, or if somebody else can still freeze your assets, is this truly, truly permissionless or decentralized? So I think it goes all through the IP stack, IT stack.
You want to add something?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with both the layered approach and then what Michael said also control. And I think I would add a third dimension, which is probably risk. So if you look at, or a couple of things, I mean, I guess if we look at the legal side, the regulation side, I think the reason why we have financial market regulatory laws is because society thinks it's a risky activity, and so they decide to regulate it, and it's usually aimed at mitigating certain risks. And obviously you can now debate whether it's successful at mitigating these or not, but that's the idea behind it, right? So I think from a legal perspective, then what needs to come into play is if something is decentralized, or not if it is decentralized, but like we can say something is legally decentralized probably also if it is successful at mitigating certain risks that would come up in a centralized setting, right? So you need to take that risk approach in mind as well. But I think it goes hand in hand with control, right? What I'm trying to say is just not every sort of control over everything should also make you liable to regulation, right? You need to look at, do I control something that is also risky from a user perspective?
Just quickly on that, just reminded me something, an angle which I really like about that. You can ask yourself the question, is there anybody else than you that has more control or information than you? Because that's something I say when I talk about liquidity, V1 or V2, where I say every user, there is no user that has more control or information than any other else, being a developer, us as a company. And I think that's for me a bit the ideal decentralization state, where you really, this power asymmetry, try to balance out. So I think that's a good question to keep in mind. Yeah, are all users equal?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Hyperliquid. I actually wanted to have someone from Hyperliquid on the panel too, to kind of give a little bit a different perspective again, because it's all about inviting all sorts of perspectives. Unfortunately, the person didn't want to join the panel, so maybe that speaks for itself. But what I heard is something, that very resonates a lot with me too. I mentioned this DeFi scan concept, and you talked about layers, right? You talked about control, and then risks, right, Florian? So I think when we want to explore and understand what decentralization means, we really first have to understand how DeFi technology usually looks like. What are the different components? What's the stack, right? And fortunately, we have also academic people who have been working on those questions in Switzerland specifically. And so we can borrow some of those concepts from there, right? And I think it's really what you explained, right? So there are different layers. We have let's just start with a blockchain as one layer, and you go even a little bit beneath that. The internet as the basic kind of building block. Is the blockchain decentralized, right? And then you build on this blockchain. If you build liquidity on a blockchain that is not decentralized, is liquidity still decentralized or not, right? So the basic layer is very important. And then I think you said it, so you have the smart contracts. Who has control over those contracts, right? And it's always interesting when personally I speak with people who are not very deep, let's say in crypto or DeFi. The idea or understanding of smart contracts oftentimes is, well, those are autonomous programs of sorts, right? Or, immutable programs, but they are actually not, right? they're just programs, and you can build in all sorts of control mechanisms or permissions, right?
I wanted to point out something else also, why decentralization. It's a bit a wake-up call. Sometimes we forget that, because you said it, why do we have regulation? Because there are risks. People run into this risk, and now we need to control those. And I think if we want to keep something like DeFi flourishing or credible, I think it needs to be really decentralized, because otherwise, why should there something exist if it has almost the same risks, or it has a mix of risks? So I think there are a lot of protocols that are a bit centralized and decentralized, and I think there is not much air to breathe. You know, either I think we can create a totally different risk profile and hopefully get other regulation, because other risk, there should be other rules. But what we're seeing is the air is really thin, you know, kind of, and if we really want to be able to DeFi like we want to do it, yeah, I think we need to really go down this route of full decentralization, because otherwise we will be put kind of in the same bucket as already TradFi, and it's right now already really a hard battle, because almost no institution can interact with DeFi these days.
I mean, I agree. I think that reminds me a bit of the, you know, kind of future scenario that I'm not sure if you even brought it up once, Michael, but the idea of kind of, okay, decentralization it's a spectrum, right? And in the future there is probably, or one theory says that there is going to be kind of a DeFi projects are going to move to either side of that spectrum. Also, if you factor in the legal side, because I mean, if regulation starts to become, you know, more active in that field, you need to be position yourself on either end of the spectrum. Either you go fully decentralized and say, okay, again, what you're mentioning, different risks, different rules, right? So we might have our own kind of garden to play with here that other people can't tap into, or you go into decentralized spectrum and you start to comply with the rules that other TradFi people have as well. But I think the whole middle part, the Dino projects, over time, I think it will become more and more difficult for them. And I think, I mean, I guess we do have examples of DeFi now kind of powering or interacting with TradFi more. I think in the notes you mentioned Morpho, for example, Nils, and I think, you know, they have done integrations now with Coinbase, I think Swissborg as well. That's kind of, so the idea of really having that neutral base layer powering then more centralized applications directly to the user, I think that is a future scenario I can see.
Yeah, and you don't even have to go as far as to Morpho. You can also look at Liquidity, for instance, who has been integrated with Bitcoin Swiss for quite some time already. That ties a bit back to what someone said earlier. It's not just about being a decentralization maxi, but actually you're able to build better products or new types of products maybe, huh? So is this something, is it true that if we build a protocol fully decentralized, let's say fully mutable, there is no control, nothing, does that facilitate integrations, or does that, let's say, facilitate fintech applications of DeFi?
Yeah, I really like that we have the choice. You mentioned Morpho, which has vaults that are curated, and then you have something like Aave, where you have a governance that sets the parameter, and then you have Liquidity, which is immutable. And I think it's great that we have these different options, because people might like different models. Maybe it's easier to trust a team on Morpho, or maybe I trust the Aave governance more, or I just want to trust an autonomous system. So I think it's good, and I don't think one is better than the other. I think it's great to have the choice. And for integration, something we learned, I think, where we saw an advantage or people liked it, is immutability can help with integration. Because how can you build something on top if it can change below and you are not aware what could happen? So if we want to build kind of these blocks, then immutability, something like Liquidity, helps, because you know what can happen. And if you don't have that as a building block, then on top it's it's clear that you have to have some parameters or need to be able to change something because everything below can change.
I could imagine that's even more important for institutions who need to do due diligence on something they integrate with. If the thing can change,
absolutely.
maybe you can share a bit.
I mean, that's the feedback we get. That's what they really like, what makes it easier, that they can do due diligence once, they don't need to monitor, and yeah, with others there is an uncertainty.
Well, we can directly kind of go over to important follow-up questions then, right? For the legal, side of things and regulation. Does it help to be decentralized? As a team building a DeFi protocol, do I get rid of problems around regulation if the protocol is decentralized?
Yeah, I think there's always like the theory and practice, right? So I mean, taking a step back, I think decentralization is not something that's inherent or native to the law, really. I think the way the law works is more that there's, you have rights and obligations, and there's an addressee to these. So there's always a person or a group of person which the law looks for, which can tie its obligations, etc., to it. But I think over the recent years, we've seen more and more of that concept finding its way into the law. I think in Switzerland, DLT laws, for example, that kind of allow now to tokenize all sorts of rights and permissionlessly just peer-to-peer transfer and all of that, or there's examples in Mika, etc. I think in practice, though, I think what we still see a lot is this kind of, distrust a little bit from the regulator towards decentralization, and I think that has two reasons, really. I think one is what we discussed, that there's obviously kind of a missing definition for decentralization. They're not really sure what they're looking for, so they just default to defining it very, very loosely, and lots of different anchor points to kind of tie people back into centralization. And then the other thing is that there's quite a lot of I think, projects out there which call themselves DeFi, which are obviously not, right? And that's also regulators, they're not stupid people. I think they can see that. So that doesn't really help. But again, I think then from a long-term perspective, I would think so, right? And that goes back into what I've been saying with this kind of convergence to either side of the decentralization spectrum. I think in the long term, I could see that this could be a USP, also from a legal perspective, of really going fully decentralized and then not competing anymore with more centralized projects, because you are subject to different rules and you might be able to do things differently than other people. But I think very much, as Michael said, it's from a technical perspective, it's a lot of work and it's not the easy solution. It's also from a legal perspective, I think, not the easy solution, right?
But it's interesting you say, right, that the spectrum, you're on the one or the other side of the spectrum. You're decentralized or you're not. You're DeFi or you're CeFi, kind of. On the technical side, it's really a spectrum, as you say, right? I mean, it's not I'm decentralized or not. I mean, there are the extreme examples like liquidity, but on the other side or in between, liquidity and let's say CeFi or let's say USDC, as an example of a less decentralized stablecoin, there is a real spectrum, right? Technically speaking, you can have different types of control, for instance, right? You can have control that would give, let's say, an operator or a DAO access to user funds, which could be seen as higher risk, and you can have, control that just allows, let's say, Uniswap to switch the fee on and off, right? Which is in terms of risk much different. Would you say that this is not really congruent with the law and the legal perspective, where, well, you're either decentralized or you're not?
Yes. Again, I think that it doesn't really fit into the legal framework there, because in legal terms, either you are a bank or you are not. You are not a little bit and then you're subject to a little bit of the regulation, but it's like yes or no. But I think obviously the difficult thing then is to define, okay, when do we meet that threshold, right? And I think I've been thinking about that, and I think the technical decentralization is a basis or a foundation for legal. So I think there needs to be a high degree of technical decentralization, but I don't think it probably doesn't. It's not congruent. It's not one the same. You know, I think probably not.
And just that you're talking about technical decentralization, let's chill a bit for you, because I think everybody should really look at defiscan.info. These guys have done an amazing job in looking at the technical decentralization. And now just imagine, how long are we in the space? Nothing like this has been present. Kind of what have we been doing? You know, and kind of look at these protocols, and it's just mind-blowing how much control and stuff is in there. I'm not saying it's bad, but you should know. And something you told me, it's how hard it is to find that out, even if the information is public. So I think we should be much more transparent, like more self-regulation, and have these ways. And it opened also my eyes about some protocols, things I didn't know. You found out that Uniswap, which is great, I think Uniswap, Pool Together, and Liquidity have stage 2. All others are a bit in transition from the ones you looked at. Yeah, learning Uniswap hasn't verified the contract on an L2, even though they are a great project. Small things, kind of, they just get overlooked. So I think that's a really important initiative and can help us to clarify, and coming to your point, the regulation. I think the problem is we have 2 problems. And if we don't fight for that, we will have really this ongoing uphill battle. We have different risks. Kind of these different risks need to be acknowledged. DeFi can help so that the regulator says, and not just trying to put us in a bank box or not, but understanding the risks and dealing differently with it. And I think the other problem is also they just need somebody. They need somebody they can point at. So there is a missing concept, how do we deal if there is nobody we can blame? And what then happens is that I think in Miko, they go after the front ends, for example, because yeah, we can catch that. If you look at it from a tech perspective and what they do, it just doesn't make sense. But I think there, again, wake up call, we should fight for that, because otherwise it gets really hard if they get that wrong, and we can't, they always try to put us in the existing box. Yeah, and that's a bit the danger I see. And yeah, it's just kind of crazy how much regulation they are drafting for. I don't see that many risks. The market isn't so big, but kind of they're keen writing hundreds of pages, and while we are still building and almost missing a bit what's going on the legal regulatory side.
Maybe something for me to understand better, but I feel like at this point in the world, there are many fragmented jurisdictions which believe in very different philosophies of how to regulate crypto. Like maybe Switzerland is more progressive than maybe America. Debatable or not debatable, but do you think like this fragmentation of beliefs, how it should be regulated, could create a problem, given that the inherent nature of crypto goes beyond this globalization concept?
Personally, I think, again, it depends, again, how your DeFi project is set up, right? If you are on the extreme side of the decentralized spectrum, like Liquidity, yes, it's just code, it's just logic that runs on the internet, kind of, right? And it's global. But as soon as you have control and, let's say, an organization, I mean, you know, even a DAO is some form of organization, right? As soon as you have control and you kind of move a bit more to the left side of the spectrum, I mean, you already start to have those, let's say, access points for local regulation, right? Because where is this control exercised from, right? And then I think it's not so much just the global infrastructure on the internet anymore, but it's coming closer to a financial product that someone wants to regulate, right?
And I mean, to your question, I think it's really important how the attitude or kind of the beliefs of the country. We see it with Trump, kind of how he turns that around. And I think, honestly, I think we're not lobbying enough, that just people understand that and create these laws and environments. and Trump is the best example, because it's not enough that it's just decentralized. Uniswap is decentralized, but can I now as a company LP there, or kind of do I need a license for that? You know, it's decentralized, but I might not be able to use it. So I think, yeah, it matters a lot.
Yeah, I think a couple of thoughts. I think, I mean, it's still DeFi, setting up DeFi projects is still very much to this day a game of regulatory and legal arbitrage as well. So there's always these considerations. Okay, I mean, most projects have some sort of legal company somewhere involved, and like where do they want to set it up, and what are the risks? And there's regulation is one side of this, but there are other considerations like how easy it is to, for example, raise funds, or how are the tax laws. You know, very much like things that any startup would think of, right? So that's also needs to come in mind. It's not always just about regulation; it's about other things as well. And then, yeah, I think you mentioned Trump, of course. Like, it's always shifting, right? Now he's saying, okay, US is the place for crypto, etc. So everybody is like, no, we feel it. Everybody is nervous. How should they now set up a company in the US so that they can claim their DeFi project and their token is also a US token and things like that, right? So that it shifts all the time. Yeah, so I think I don't think that we're going to see kind of a uniform. Or not anytime soon, a very uniform understanding of what decentralization is, and I think it's because essentially it's very much a politically driven topic as well, and it's very unlikely, in my opinion, that we're going to see everybody coming together to one table and say, like, okay, this is fine, this is regulated, and this is not. You know, I think it will kind of stay that way, but it's fine because it's in the traditional markets. It's the same as well. You know, some jurisdictions are better to set up fund structures than other jurisdictions are, and so there's always this arbitrage going on. But I think for the perspective of Switzerland, I also agree that we should be lobbying more. And what you mentioned is the whole thing about, you know, I want to say, like, keep it broader, say asset management, you know, offering DeFi yields now to more people, also in a TradFi setting, integrations, etc. There's so much legal uncertainty in Switzerland how you can do that, and that just drives people away, you know. And people would be very happy to do this in a regulated way and in a safe way, but they're just missing the puzzle pieces what they should be doing.
And just an anecdote that decentralization is not just a holy grail and then you're fine and it opens everything. I mean, we have a truly decentralized stablecoin. So let's look at Europe. Now their deal is DAI and USDT, so exchanges don't touch it anymore. I still think our stablecoins, LUSD and BOLD, are decentralized. Actually, they shouldn't be touched by MiCA. They should be able to use it. But because of the uncertainty and compliance, and should we take this additional risk, probably they won't use it, even though they might be able to do so. So just to give you also an example on that, it's just because the burden is so high, these additional risks, they are a bit afraid, or they can't explain it to the regulator. So they dropped the ball on that.
We've made the whole tour, right? Kind of started with just talking about, okay, launching these DeFi projects to kind of trying to qualify what this actually means, DeFi, right? And we talked about the different layers. You have to look at each individual layer. And then the legal perspective of things, which is, again, an entirely different one. It kind of feels like we're back at where we started here in this conversation. So we are going to look at ending, you know, this part of the conversation. Maybe you wanted to add one last thing that you want to give everybody on the way, Michael, and then we can go through to close. And then, yes, I think we have some minutes, maybe, for questions.
Fight for decentralization.
Fight.
Yeah, I think the more we decentralize, the more we go away from user experience. And at SAFE, we are trying to tackle exactly that challenge, because users always choose comfort over decentralization or privacy, even if it means maybe revealing something or losing control or something, or forgetting about sovereignty because something is more comfortable. And the more we decentralize, the farther we get away from mass adoption. And at SAFE, we are trying to build better products which onboard the entire world on chain.
I don't know. I think it's a interdisciplinary topic. So if you have friends who are also in the legal field and interested about this, also motivate them to work more on that, because I think there's still a lot to work on that front as well, not just on the builders front, obviously, as well.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. I think we have 1 or 2 minutes for
yes,
for a
we
question.
have 3-4 minutes for some questions.
Cool.
Hello, thank you for this nice panel. How do you see AI agents in terms of decentralization? It would be boring not to cover the AI aspect.
No, it's a good question. It's of course a very a topic that's kind of on top of everyone's mind. I think, at least if you look at crypto Twitter. Personally, I think I usually try to relate this somewhat to when we started building DeFi products. We oftentimes have certain functions that someone needs to actually service, right? And we don't want to do it as a as a company, as an entity or so. And the idea that you have, let's say, autonomous agents that could actually, we call these always keeper functions for those of you more technical, if kind of those agents can help, for instance, with this, that's just one aspect. It could actually help giving away, certain control over these functions to, an AI agent, for instance. That's what I usually associate with. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love that question. This is something that I'm exploring on a very diligently exploring. So I think like there are strong synergies because these AI agents and these models, they consume immense amount of data, every kind of data that can be scraped from X maybe or Telegram, and then you trust these models to make an informed decision. And a very fitting piece of puzzle where I see is that there are a lot of mundane or routine tasks that AI automates very well. And in crypto, for example, if you're onboarding to a new chain, you have no gas tokens, you got nothing. And you have to probably bridge from some other chain, or you might have to go to a centralized exchange, or you get it from a friend maybe. And this AI agent would find the best route on the best price and do the bridging on your behalf. And instead of me having to hop on from one exchange to the other, making sure there's some liquidity available because you want to try out some completely new chain like Abstract maybe, I think that's where AI really solves the problem of onboarding. And to be honest, this is something that I'm currently exploring, and if you're also, would be happy to collaborate with you.
Great. Thank you very much. Sorry, do you want to add anything?
No, I was just looking at you to see whether there is more time.
Yes,
or we should...
unfortunately, we are
Okay.
Out of time. Thank you very much. Big applause for our panelists.
Thank you.